Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, today, the amazing guest is me. If you're unfamiliar with my work, I am a longtime plant eater, vegan almost 50 years, and the author of 4 books, Unprocessed, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, Own Your Health, and my pièce de résistance, which comes out next year, Sweet Indulgence. And I'm going to be creating for you a delicious, healthy, pretty easy holiday meal, 10 recipes from all of these books. Now, if you're on my mailing list, you're going to get all the recipes in a PDF or an ebook, so don't even worry. If you're not, I can't put them in the show notes. Show notes are that thing underneath the YouTube video when you click more, because I'm limited to a certain number of characters and 10 recipes just won't fit. So if you're not on my mailing list and didn't get the recipes, or you want the recipes, all you have to do is email help@chefaj.com. Know that we're not a 24-hour operation, but we will get them to you as soon as possible as my way of thanking you for watching the video and wanting you to have a very happy, healthy holiday season. So what I need to do now is walk over to the kitchen and start cooking. So let's get started. As I said, I'm going to make 10 recipes, and these are great for any of the holidays, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whether you don't celebrate at all. This is basically what I made for our Thanksgiving dinner when we had 35 hungry vegans over. They loved it. So I felt, why not just repeat it for the next holiday? There's a few variations I've made, and I'll try to give you lots of tips and tricks and ideas as well. So the first thing we're going to make is a mocktail. We're an alcohol-free house, so usually we serve water, of course, sparkling water, Martinelli's. We often make Italian sodas, which is where you take just, a bubble water and maybe some California balsamic vinegar and a fruity flavor and let people make their own. They love that. I often make eggnog, but no eggs or no sugar. Several recipes are in my book and on YouTube. But one thing I love to make during the holidays, because cranberries aren't available all year round, or if they are, I don't see them in general, is my cranberry spritzer. And again, all the recipes will come to you as a PDF if you write help@chefaj.com. So I'm not going to say amounts because I don't remember them anyway. But I have everything already measured out, which is a great tip, by the way, whether you're preparing for a holiday dinner or any time, is to do what's called mise en place. It's a French word that means everything in its place, where you basically, each recipe, take all the ingredients after you read the recipes and measure them, because the time you would spend running to the fridge and the pantry, that's why it takes so long. And personally, I don't have a lot of time. I don't know about you. I work full time and I have a rich social life now that I live in Northern California, and I have 2 volunteer jobs. And it's much more important to me to have time to volunteer than to do things like, peel the garlic, even though it's more expensive to buy it in cloves. I take every shortcut I can, and I did on Thanksgiving, and we had 35 satisfied customers. So what we need for the cranberry spritzer is some unsweetened apple juice. This is unfiltered, but any kind of apple juice will do. We need our raw cranberries and a little bit of lime juice. I just blended that together for 10 seconds. I love the Blendtec. I love the Vitamix too. I have both, but I love it because it tells you exactly how many seconds you blended for. And another thing I love about it, which is going to come in handy for a future recipe that we're making today, is it's also a measuring cup. So I don't have to dirty another measuring cup. So what I'm going to do is split this into a couple of glasses. It's just so pretty. And you can always save a fresh cranberry to top it with. Also, if you ever have mint in your house, mint is always a great topper. This actually looks like it maybe would make even 3. And then you take your favorite club soda, which, oh, there we go. Got to do that resistance training, right? And then you just top this off. And it's just so pretty. And then people feel like they have something a little bit special. And they don't feel deprived if they didn't have their alcoholic beverage. And it's delicious, and it's not sweet. And then you can toast everyone to their health. So that was easy. I wish I had that button that said that was easy, because it was. And it's fun. And it's sweet enough from the unsweetened apple juice, but it's not sickly sweet. Okay, so Next, I'm going to make some tortilla chips. Well, why am I making tortilla chips for the holidays? I'm telling you, I gave my first formal dinner party, believe it or not, at the age of 11. I guess I was always destined to be a chef. I lived with my aunt and her mother, who was a cordon bleu chef in Switzerland. I talk about that in my book on process, which, by the way, we have a great special going on right now. My publisher is bundling a bunch of my books together with free shipping and lots of bonuses. But it was just really, really fun living with somebody that didn't speak English. I actually got to learn French, and we had the most amazing food. So I gave my first dinner party, and I've given quite a few dinner parties since. And one thing I learned, and I actually learned this from the chef who created the menu of the wonderful restaurant in Canoga Park called Follow Your Heart. I believe it was the first vegetarian restaurant there. His name is David Spain. He said, a meal is like a Broadway show. So the idea is recency and primacy. People remember what you give them first and what you give them last, hence appetizers and desserts. You can do a wonderful presentation and delicious presentation with those two courses. They kind of forget everything in between, kind of like a Broadway show. The opening musical number and the closing musical number is always what you remember. So I make some pretty fancy appetizers. People love my pesto stuffed mushrooms that we always make at Rancho La Puerta. If you'd like to go with me next year, let me know. But I got to tell you, chips are, you can never go wrong with tortilla chips, but they generally have a lot of salt, a lot of oil. Well, not if you make them yourself. It's so easy to make, especially if you have an air fryer. I'm going to do it the way Al Schmidt, my friend, who's almost 88 years old, who reversed his heart disease at 80 by following a plant-based diet a la Dr. Esselstyn. He showed me the easiest way to make them. I was making them in the oven and they were fine, but it was taking like 10 and 15 minutes. And why heat up the oven if you could just use an air fryer? It doesn't heat up the house. It's much quicker. But what's more important than that is it makes them crisper. And that is what we want. We want an authentic chick, even though we're not, cooking it, frying it in oil and adding salt. I mean, I guess if you wanted to add salt, you could, but then how are you going to get it to stick? So one of the things is you want to use quality ingredients. And so my very favorite brand of tortillas is Mi Rancho. And if you don't have a Whole Foods, or actually we can get these at Sprouts and Raley's, they do sell these online, at least in the United States. But you want to get the thin credibles, not just because they're much lower in calories. It's not about the calories. It's about the thinness of the tortilla. And because these are thin credibles, so incredibly thin, they crisp up. And I've had people that eat the standard American diet, like workers that came by, said these are as good as any kind of Dorito chip. They come 12 in a package. And so what you want to do is you want to take 6 of them. And then what I do, just move this stuff out of the way, is I have my little special food scissors that I use only for food. This was a gift from Dr. Hans Steele. And I personally like to cut them in eighths. You could do fourths, you can do sixths, but I really like eighths. And it's very easy to do. You just make the little triangles. It really doesn't have to be perfect, but it is so easy using the Al Schmidt method of chips. And he's even had restaurants starting to do this for us up here so that we can have SOS free food at restaurants. I just kind of try to make them all fit. It's okay if there is some overlap, if you want to take the time to make this kind of pattern just so that they all fit. But I have spent weeks before a party doing as many as I can in advance, because I got to tell you, regardless of what the dip is, and usually it's just guacamole and salsa, many recipes for those in my books, people love chips. People love finger food. People love crunch. And these really are the best chips I've tried. And I think it all has to do with the tortilla, because it's a good quality tortilla. It's just corn and masa. That's it. There's no funny stuff or preservatives. And they are amazing. So we just try to get them all on. They don't need anything on them because you're going to be dipping them into something. And so what we're going to be dipping them into is a dip that I call an artichoke spinach dip. If you've ever gone to a restaurant like the Cheesecake Factory or TGI Fridays, you've probably heard of an artichoke spinach dip. It often has lots of cheese, lots of dairy. Well, ours is going to have none of that, and it's made from a secret ingredient, which is vegetables. So I'm going to pop these into the air fryer at 325 for 5 minutes. And I have another one that just made. I'm going to bring out and show you. You can probably hear how crunchy these are. And I'm just going to add them to the big bowl that I'm working on. You think, oh, that's so many chips. Believe me, I've never had a party where there was a single chip left. And there's no cleanup, there's no wasting anything, no parchment paper needed. Easiest chip you'll ever make. These keep great either in a nice Tupperware or in a Ziploc bag. So that's 2 recipes down and only 8 to go. So next I'm going to be making one of my favorite dips. I often make this when I teach the Doodle program because it is very low in fat, because instead of using things like nuts or tofu for the creaminess, or even beans, we're using a secret ingredient, very low calorie density, is cauliflower. I'm a shortcut queen. I don't have a lot of time, so I buy frozen vegetables. Nothing wrong with that. You know, they're often as nutritious as fresh anyway. They're picked at their peak of ripeness and usually flash frozen. So I've got my cauliflower, which I defrosted, and I am putting it in the blender. This is an artichoke spinach dip. So we have our cauliflower, we've got our lemon juice, got a little bit of nooch, also known as nutritional yeast. This is an unfortified brand. I'm using Dylan Holmes, well, your world brand, but any brand that you like, you can use. Here's one of the secrets: roasted garlic instead of fresh. Fresh garlic has a real bite, but even people that sometimes struggle with garlic, when you roast it, it mellows it out. It makes it creamy. And again, the air fryer is the secret. It only takes a few minutes in the air fryer. There's no oil or anything needed. And this is going to go in there. We are going to blend. It may need a little water. We'll know in a second. Then I am going to add my frozen and defrosted artichoke hearts. I get these at Trader Joe's. I've seen them at Whole Foods and actually regular grocery stores. I like these better than the canned because not only do the canned have salt, but they kind of like, I don't know, citric acid. I just don't like the taste of canned things in general, with the exception of maybe a few tomato products that don't come anywhere else. Now I'm going to blend. Now, some people like to have a little bit of toothsome quality. So if you'd rather, you can just cut up the artichokes as finely as you want with a hulu, a knife, food scissors, and do it that way. But I like to blend it in. If it doesn't blend easily, we want to keep it as thick and creamy as possible. You can always stir it a bit. And then if you need to, as a last resort, add more water. One thing that the Vitamix has over any other blender is that tamper. So you need that little vortex to go so you know the stuff is blended. Oh man, this smells amazing from the roasted garlic. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a bowl and I'm going to mix in the spinach by hand. Now, if you put the spinach in, which when I teach my hands-on cooking classes, I always tell people read the recipe once, read the recipe twice. A lot of people don't. And what they do is they put everything in the blender. It's not terrible, but then what happens is you get this kind of dark green dip that, in my opinion, isn't quite as pretty or appetizing. But if you don't mind, I suppose you could do it that way. Another thing I love about this Blendtec is the square shape. It's so easy to get everything out of the sides. It really is. So it doesn't get caught on the blade. Believe it or not, you can freeze this. I didn't think you could, but somebody said, can you freeze it? And I'm like, I don't know. So when people ask me that question, usually what I do is instead of freezing a whole recipe and then maybe it doesn't taste good, I take just a little bit out, freeze it for a couple days, and then I taste it. And this actually froze really, really well. But there's never any left to freeze, so don't have to freeze it. Now, you'll want to heat this up when it's ready to eat, whether you heat things up on the stove. I'm okay using a microwave. Both Dr. Fern and Dr. Greger say they're safe. And we are going to add a pound of frozen spinach. Now, look at this. Once you squeeze out the water of the spinach, you have almost nothing. It's like not even probably 1 cup of food. And when people say, oh, you need a pound of vegetables, really? That's like a cup of spinach, if you ask me. And so we're going to stir that in by hand so we can get the pretty little green flecks.
And it's so incredibly creamy without having to use any of the high fat items that are usually used for creaminess in the plant-based world, like cream cheeses, tofu, nuts, seeds. And I mean, you could eat this whole thing for, it's a pound of spinach, a pound of cauliflower, basically, I don't know, a couple of hundred calories. So we'll serve this with our crunchy chips and also some crudité. And my favorite crudité to serve with this is red bell pepper, because carrots can be a little hard and for people to choose sometimes, and celery, but red bell pepper is also pretty for the holidays, and it looks very nice with this dip. So that's basically it. I am going to heat it up in my Pampered Chef microwave steamer when it's time to eat it. But until then, we can put it in the refrigerator. Now, some other fun uses for this, believe it or not, are stuffing a baked potato. This is delicious in a russet potato, and it's also a delicious dip to stuff mushrooms with and then put them in the air fryer. So this is from my book, Own Your Health, as is the Cranberry Spritzer. And you will make it and enjoy it. So the next recipe I'm going to make, and it might sound like, what do you make these for at the holiday? Well, people love bread, but I'm not really a bread person. I don't like when things go bad. You know, how much bread do you buy? People have gluten intolerance. And by the way, even before I became intolerant, which is 2012, I always did everything gluten-free because there's always at least one person that is, and it's just easier. And the thing is anything you can make with, you can make without. So why not? So I'm going to make a recipe from my upcoming book, not next year, all the desserts, sweetened naturally with fruit. It's called Sweet Indulgence. So you're getting it here first. These are my sweet corn muffins. So one thing I really recommend, because again, we want to think about the environment, and even though you can get nonstick cupcake liners and parchment paper, it's kind of wasteful, especially when for, less than $10, you can get a silicone muffin pan, which is oven safe to 450 degrees. Actually, I got 2 of them for $14. So this one, I think, was 14 because it has the sturdy side. So a lot of people like that. And cleanup is very, very easy, and I love it. And because I'm doing everything in the blender, I don't have to mix in another bowl. I try to really reduce the number of measuring cups and dishes when I'm cooking, because we got to clean up, obviously. So I actually made one of these in advance because I never want to rush something. So I used to be a pastry chef for 5 years, executive vegan pastry chef at Sante in Los Angeles. And I didn't use oil or sugar or salt. All my desserts were vegan. It wasn't a vegan restaurant. And one thing I can tell you is don't rush getting things out of the pan when it comes to baking. You've got to let them cool. And that's the part of the problem is people are in a hurry. So I made these earlier, and these are, I think, really, really beautiful, these corn muffins. And they're sweet enough to be more of a dessert, but they're not so sweet that people can't have them in a savory manner. So what I like to do, if you wouldn't mind lowering the camera, you can see that with the silicone, look at this, they just pop out. And what I like to do is put them on a cupcake tree. And I love it's a little bit crisp on top. Like I said, some people can eat these. They're sweet enough for dessert. Some people, like my husband, sometimes toast them and put a little fruit sweetened jam on them. They're fantastic, crumbled over chili. But people just love them. I serve them with the holiday meal, and a lot of times people eat them before they eat their holiday meal, and that's okay. But isn't this pretty to have a display like that, on the table? I can also use this when I do make cupcakes. Look at that. And so I'll make the other one. This will be filled in a second. And this is super easy to clean. I really just wipe it out. It goes in the dishwasher. Really, really easy. So we're just going to basically put everything in the blender. As I mentioned, I always pre-measure out my ingredients. That is called mise en place. And I also try to use 7 ingredients or less, even fewer if I can, for every recipe. Always making sure now, I learned this after writing my first book 12 years ago, to have ingredients that anyone can get anywhere, at least in the United States. I know people told me I can't get fresh cranberries in Australia. But I do a lot of cooking classes in person and on Zoom for doctors and healthcare organizations in underserved communities. And and I'm told only use things you can find in the stores where the people live. Well, a lot of times where people live, where I'm doing these classes, the only store is a 99-cent store or a Walmart. So I make sure that everything is available in those stores. Well, of course, that doesn't mean that every single brand that I'm using is available. All right, let me just move my beautiful cupcake display out of the way. Make some room here. Seems like no matter how big of a kitchen I get, I need a bigger one. All right, and so what I love, I've said about the blend tech is that I don't have to measure. I had this measured just because I had something else in the blender, but it's really cool how it's a measuring cup right there. And that's good because I'm going to be using a little bit of organic date syrup from I Love Date Lady. And yes, this is sold at Walmart. It's amazing. And Walmart's open late. So sometimes I don't have time to order from the company website, even though I have a discount code and I can always get it at Walmart. But what's really cool is date syrup, because I'm using the blender with the measuring cup on the side, I don't have to dirty another cup. How cool is that? So next, I'm going to add my dry ingredients. I've got my organic medium grade cornmeal. I've got my gluten-free oats, applesauce, baking powder, and baking soda. And I'm going to blend. So much easier than getting on a hand mixer, mix master, food processor. And then I'm going to add my apple cider vinegar. This activates the baking powder and baking soda and causes some kind of chemical reaction that makes it rise, just like eggs would. This is something I learned a long time ago. There used to have something called a depression cake, where it was in Hershey's cookbook, where they didn't use eggs, not because they were trying to be vegan, because I guess they couldn't get them during the Depression. And so this is really a cool idea. Baking powder and baking soda, you can get, of course, aluminum free if you look, and even sodium free, depending on where you live or if you're willing to buy online. So then this is going to activate it. This is what's going to help it rise. And that's it. Baking powder, P, poofs, baking soda, S, spreads. And so now what I'm going to do is just pour it into my cupcake pan. And I just, try to put a little bit in at a time so to make them all as even as possible. If you wanted to be perfect, of course, you could use a measuring cup or a cookie scoop. But again, I'm trying to decrease how many things I have to wash, especially when I'm making a meal for a lot of people, like I did 35 people for Thanksgiving. So I don't want to be washing stuff all the time. People just love this recipe. I take it to the potlucks. We have a wonderful Healthy Living in Lincoln with Chef AJ meetup group, and we have a potluck once a month. If you live anywhere near Sacramento or visiting, please join. It's free. We even had a band last month, the Party Boys. It was incredible. We had people coming in from Washington and New York and Maryland, driving in from Fresno. So it's great. These, I don't know if they freeze because they get eaten. However, there's no preservatives in any of these baked goods that I make. So, you got to eat them within a few days or at least refrigerate them. So it's not like when you buy stuff. The chips are ready, by the way. I just haven't had a chance to walk over to the air fryer. Just try to get that in. There's just a little bit more in here. Where's my little spatula? It doesn't have to be perfect if one's a little bit bigger than the other, but you can see how easy this is because all I have to clean up is the blender and the muffin pan once they're done. Just going to call that good. Just going to clean it up as best I can. I am not the neatest chef. As a matter of fact, some might tell you I'm the messiest chef. I do what's called the plop and drop to get them moving. You can see some are higher than the others. And now I'm going to go stick this in the oven. Actually, the Breville. I use my Breville as my oven, even though I have an oven. And then I'm going to come back and make the next recipe. So here are the chips. It took 5 minutes. I'm gonna let these cool before I add them. So next, what I want to make are the roasted Brussels sprouts. So I'm going to need this, and this is an air fryer. I can't bring the Breville over, it's over there, it's just too heavy. So I also have a smaller one. This is a GoWise. This was less than $100 many, many years ago. They're much cheaper now. And depending on the time of year, I've seen air fryers like this for like $37 at places like Sam's Club and Walmart. And so this has a basket where we're gonna be putting everything. These are very easy to use. This is what I use to roast the garlic because it was just such a small amount. I felt I'm not gonna put that in the Breville, but this is not big enough to make as many chips as I like to make. So, bag of Brussels sprouts, 1 pound. These have been defrosted. I am going to put them in the basket, and depending on how well done you like them, I mean, I've done them for 20 minutes at 400, but most people probably want them a little bit greener than I do. So what I'm going to do is just do the preset, which is 370 for 15 minutes, and we're going to let it go. Okay, and while that's cooking, I'm going to make part of the entree. There's a couple of layers to the entree, and that's going to be a holiday loaf. You can use any loaf recipe you like for this recipe. It's going to be a frosted loaf. You could actually make it into an amazing cake that looks like a dessert cake if you want. I'll tell you how. But because I serve so many people, it's not feasible. Usually I have to make it in one of these, because when you're serving, 40 people, an 8-inch, 9-inch layer cake is not enough. And this is what I'm usually cooking. Now, there's a lot of wonderful loaf and burger recipes out there, so choose the one you like. But what I've done is I've adapted the seasonings to give it a holiday flair. I have many burger loaf recipes in my books. I have a lentil loaf. I have a smoky sweet potato burger. I have a Bravo burger, which actually is my recipe, but it's in my book. I have a Chipotle burger. I have a beanless bean burger. But by far the easiest recipe is the one that's based on the smoky sweet potato burger, because it only has 4 or 5 ingredients that you probably might even have at your house right now. And if not, they're pretty accessible. And I'm going to take an even greater shortcut by not roasting my sweet potatoes, which you can do, but I buy these big ones that are like 2 pounds. They take like an hour and 45 minutes to roast. Is I just buy mashed sweet potatoes at Trader Joe's and defrost them. If you don't have a Trader Joe's, a lot of places have canned sweet potatoes with nothing in it. I've seen it at Sprouts, I've seen it at Whole Foods. But again, a lot of times I will take the time to roast the sweet potatoes, but I'm making so many recipes. And when I'm making this, I'm doing it ×8. There's just not an oven big enough. So this is a great shortcut I like to take. I simply defrost these, put them in a large mixing bowl. And to that, I'm going to add my broccoli, which I steamed in my favorite tool, which is a Pampered Chef microwave steamer. I love this because I eat steamed vegetables every day for lunch, usually for dinner as well, also for breakfast when I eat breakfast. And this is so cool. It's got these little holes you can drain. This is great for travel. It doesn't break. I've had this probably over 30 years. When I'm eating broccoli, like to eat for lunch with my hand and yams, I do about 4 minutes in the microwave, 4.5. When I'm doing it for this recipe, I do about 6 because I want it really, really soft. So I'm just going to add that to this. And by the way, this is how I'm going to heat up the dip before I serve it to the company, and then I'll put it in a pretty bowl. This is just a regular old potato mashers. I got it at Rayleigh's, so it's a fairly common tool. And I'm just going to mash this. Usually my husband, Charles, he's the masher because that's his job, but he is handling the camera right now so that you can see. And so we just want to get it all mashed. So this is my basic recipe, but instead of putting the spices in that I normally do for the sweet potato burger, which are things like chipotle powder and smoked paprika, I'm doing it with a holiday flair. Some of the spices are going to include a poultry seasoning. I love the local spicery brand because everything is made in small batches, non-irrigated. they have a huge line of salt-free seasonings, but it's, you know, you can buy these bulk seasonings, and spices, they're like medication. Just because they're old doesn't mean they'll hurt you, but they're not as potent. And this blend, all his blends are amazing, especially the barbecue and the bacon and the bada bing and the pepperoni. For this loaf is amazing. I love it. It's the best poultry seasoning I've tried. So you're gonna have a real holiday flair. There you go. And then we're gonna add the rest of the ingredients. We have our rice. Often I use white. It's whatever I have. With little organic microwavable bags. Took 3 minutes in the microwave to microwave that. And then I'm gonna add my gluten-free rolled oats. And then I have my pre-measured, all my different seasonings here. And the green part of the green onion, often known as scallions. And again, we're gonna, oh, the poultry seasoning is so good. It almost tastes like, you know, not taste, I haven't tasted it, but it almost reminds me of, you know, stuffing. The smell of stuffing, but obviously without the bread or the gluten. I thought about making a stuffing out of my sweet cornbread muffins, but I haven't done that yet. I bet that would be good, but I'm going to give you a great idea of what to do with the cornbread. Another example, I haven't done it yet, but I know it's going to be great, because usually once I think of something in my head, it's a good idea. Now, if I was making these into burgers, which you could, I would hand shape them. The only thing about burgers though is they have to be flipped. So I like cooking it in some kind of a pan. The size of the pan depends on how many times I've made the recipes. And then I can just cook it in one pan. Obviously it's going to take longer than when you roll a burger, but I think it's worth it. And we're going to be frosting the cooked loaf with something. Now, you can do this in, I don't recommend a loaf pan, at least for this recipe. I recommend either a 9x13, or we're going to use, this case, a 9x9. But you could cook it in those pans. You could cook it. I've done this in a bun pan, and I've done it in round pans if I'm going to make the cake layered. But like I said, for the amount of people I have, I did that a few years ago. The presentation was amazing because I frosted it with the inside with orange sweet potatoes, the outside with white mashed potatoes, so it looked like a vanilla cake, and the cranberry sauce on top. It's extraordinarily beautiful, but it's not as functional or easy to serve as this way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in my silicone pan. Another spatula, there we go. Oops, and mush that up is good. See, that's why we need Charles, because he's the masher of the family. So this is my basic burger formula, but with different seasonings when it's not the holiday. And I always have these in my freezer. Leave them a couple nights a week for dinner. And now that they have that new bread that has just the ingredients of buckwheat, water, and salt, the pacha, I can now have it on a bun if I want instead of lettuce. So just want to get this all in. And what I love about this recipe is a lot of the wonderful burger recipes you'll see require a lot of extra steps, like you gotta grate carrots, or you gotta, you know, saute an onion first, and I just don't have time for that. So I'm just gonna press this down smoothly. This is gonna take over an hour to bake, so I will do it, but I have one already made so I can show you what the next step is. If you can get an offset spatula, those are great for making things level. I actually saw one at the dollar store yesterday. I don't know why the dollar store, everything's $1.25 now, but still, it's a pretty good price for an offset spatula. Look at that. Oh, so easy. I am the queen of easy. It has to be easy, or I'm not going to be able to sustain this lifestyle like I have for almost 50 years. But easy does not mean it's not delicious. You know, if you want to cook your rice from scratch and make your broth and do all that, peel your garlic, I don't have time. Okay, again, the drop and plop, drop and plop. Stick that in the oven. Take out the one that I already made. This smells so good. It gets a little bit crispy on top. And I'm going to go put this one in the oven. So now what we want to do is make the mashed potatoes. So what we're going to do is we're going to frost the loaves or cakes, whatever you want to call them, with mashed potatoes. And then we are going to bake it again. So the mashed potatoes will be twice baked, and they're just gonna get this creaminess in the middle, this like little brown crunchy layer on top. Then we're gonna serve it with gravy and cranberry sauce. So you're gonna be shocked at how I make my mashed potatoes, and I'm afraid to give the secret away because then all the 35 people that came for Thanksgiving that said these were the best mashed potatoes they ever had are gonna be shocked that Chef AJ does this, but I'm gonna show you. Yeah. Remember, Easy is my middle name. It's one of my favorite products, and unfortunately they only sell it during the holidays, and so I stock up. Literally, and I asked Mary McDougall when Dr. McDougall's on my show, is this okay to use? They said, yes, it's literally dehydrated potato. I make the whole box. In this bowl, I have water. Just adding the flakes. I am adding non-dairy milk. I use almond milk. Another snatching up. Just stir it. Just gonna stick it in the microwave. Start with 6 minutes. Everybody's microwave is different. You don't want to over microwave it because then it's too dry. There's not going to be any lumps in here. Sure, you can substitute your own mashed potato recipe. That's fine. But if you want it creamy, and again, we want it like buttercream frosting, this is the secret. I am going to now check on my Brussels sprouts. They could use a couple of more minutes, but again, it's really up to you. And what I like to do with my Brussels sprouts, and it's okay that this has a little bit of broccoli in it, is I use this to shake it up. And so what I mean by that is we're going to glaze these with a little bit of a good quality reduced balsamic vinegar and mustard. So I love every flavor of California balsamic, but for this recipe, my favorite is the smoked hickory. So you could measure, I don't know, a tablespoon or two, but honestly, I just kind of, I've done this for so many years, I just kind of eyeball it, can't really see it, but there's not much. Remember, in any recipe, you can always add, but you can't take away. And then my favorite mustard, because I prefer not to eat salt, is Primo's. It's the only salt-free Dijon that I've ever found. It comes in garlic and it comes in habanero. I'm pretty sure I have a code for it. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. I met him at the Harvest Festival. I love this stuff. If you want to use stone ground, you can get Organicville. If you don't care about salt, use whatever you like. So I just kind of eyeball it. I mean, you don't need that much. And I'll tell you, even people that have said they don't like Brussels sprouts actually like this. So we just want to move all this out of the way for processor recipes. Let's see how that's going. Okay. I'm going to just stop it. I would like it a little bit darker, but I need to move this guy out of the way so I can get to the next recipe. And you know, people roast often with things on them like balsamic vinegar and mustard. You can do that. The thing is it's really going to make your pan dirty. So my friend Zena taught me that why not just air fry or roast first and then glaze later. You can roast. It's just that, again, you're going to need your oven and you're going to need to take a lot more time than you would. So you just shake it up like that. Let me get a plate. And that's just, I just like things that are easy, guys. And these are so delicious. They almost taste like candy. Again, I like things a little bit darker, so I would cook them a little bit longer, but you get the idea. So I want to show you how to make the dessert. This is a caramel nut torte. And this is a variation of my pecan pie. This is from my new book as well. So you'll want to have what's called a springform pan. These come in silicone with glass bottoms. This was $7.99 at Michael's. You can take the sides off very easily. Now, I don't really like using parchment paper. I know it's wasteful, but I just want to show you this tip because if you do this, it not only makes it a bottom that you don't have to clean, but what's nice about doing this is then when you want to transfer it to maybe a pretty platter for serving, it's so easy. So you can put a piece of parchment paper in like that if you want to do this trick. So with a food processor or anything, I always recommend get the biggest and best that you can afford. So we're going to start with our almonds. This was already blended up into almond meal. I could have used whole almonds, but I was out and I had this. And then I did not test my dates for pits, so I'm just going to pray there are no pits in this one. And we're going to make a crust. What we're trying to do is have this kind of stick together. And when you can make it a little ball and it doesn't crumble, that's called the break point. And then it's ready. So it's not quite ready. So what I need to do is add 1 teaspoon of the secret ingredient, vanilla bean powder. That's not vanilla powder and that's not vanilla extract. That is the secret to delicious flavors. So let it go a little longer. Test it again. When I can smush it in my hand like this and break it like this, then I know it's ready, the break point. And so this is one of the easiest crusts you'll ever make. You don't ever need to use flour, in my opinion, in recipes. I think in my new dessert cookbook with almost 160 recipes, I think I only have flour in 2. Would you mind pressing this camera down? Or not pressing it down. And then you just use your hand and you press. And that is your beautiful crust. And it looks like, and it resembles kind of a graham cracker crust, like you might be familiar with in cheesecakes, if you ever made traditional cheesecakes. Super easy to make. You don't want to overblend because then the oil starts separating from the nuts. If that happens, take a paper towel and kind of dab it. If you really want to know much about desserts, I do teach dessert master classes once a year that are interactive, where instead of me doing it, you do it and I watch you. So these are some walnuts. They were actually given to me as a present by Dr. Neil Nedley, the president of WUNAR. Thank you, Dr. Nedley. I'm just going to rough pulse it. This is going to be the topping. I could have bought those already crumbled as well. This recipe was created because I was teaching a class for UC Davis and I was supposed to make pecan pie, but I was in the process of moving and I just couldn't get to the store. I didn't have any pecans, so I used the nuts I had, which were these 3, and some people liked it better. So now I have my cashews and I'm going to add my delicious vanilla bean powder. Once you have vanilla bean powder, you will never go back to extract, I promise you. And so now we're going to process this. We don't want to go all the way to a nut butter. And I guess technically we could. And then we're just going to put this in a bowl right here. A friend of mine's husband said it reminded him of some special dessert he used to get at Neiman Marcus. So I don't know what that is, but I'm happy to take the compliment. And you can make this, actually, sometimes people make it more in a rectangular pan. And so now we're going to make the date paste, the soaked dates. And again, I recommend if you're using my recipes, you use my formula for date paste. When you buy commercial date paste, there's no water in it and the recipes tend not to work. And my recipe is just a certain amount of dates to a certain amount of water, depending on the recipe. I have not had sugar in over 20 years. I use only fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the whole fruit to sweeten everything. There's another pit. There we go. We got to do that again because we had a pit. And date paste lasts for weeks in the fridge, maybe even longer in the freezer. I've never had it go bad. The only way I've ever seen date paste go bad is if like you dipped something in it that you shouldn't have, like maybe something you were eating and then there was cross-contamination, but it lasts for months and it's a great spread on, it would be great on the muffins. It's great on a toast. You never need to use sugar ever. And fake sugars and 0-calorie sweeteners, even less healthy. If you have time, always cut your dates in half and check, because even pitted dates always tend to have pits. So now I'm going to add back in cashews. What a mess here. I don't like to waste all of the dates. That's the problem with not taking the time to do things right. You know that old saying, you can do it right or you can do it over. I've wasted quite a bit of dates doing that. So now we're just going to process everything together. And you will never bake a pie in that small amount of time, I'll tell you. So what we're going to do is just place this over the crust. Now this is going to set up in the freezer. You're not going to bake it, so it's technically a raw dessert. So somebody that is a raw foodist could enjoy this, and you're going to serve it, taking it out of the freezer for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. You're never going to want to keep it in the refrigerator or at room temperature. It's going to have the consistency of like an ice cream cake, maybe a little bit firmer. So freeze it for at least, I would say, 8 hours or overnight. You can slice it in advance or wait, but you want to keep it in the freezer. Now, one of the things is there's quite a bit of batter on the blade. It's difficult to clean a blade. Alexa, set an alarm for 75 minutes.
1 hour, 15-minute alarm set for 4:01 p.m.
That's the, whatchamacallit, the loaf is going in. So what you do is you just pulse for a quick second here. And now you can see my blade is completely clear. So what I do is I take all, look at all this. There's probably at least a half a cup of filling that I would have left behind had I not taken that step. And there we go. And now take my offset spatula, spread it over the top. That means my muffins are ready. You already saw the finished product, nice and smooth. And then I'm gonna take my walnuts. I needed quite this many over the top. Yeah, I will, we'll see. Yeah, looks like I might. And again, you could have little bigger pieces. We just didn't want those big halves, you know? I'll use all of it. Spread it over the top. Now you can just gently press down with your hand. And you can pop it in the freezer now, or you can just take a little bit of date syrup. I don't know, maybe that's 2 tablespoons. Believe it or not, in the freezer, this just spreads out. I don't know how or why. I used to use a pastry brush, but I would say that was no more than 2 tablespoons. And you'll see when it's all done, it's going to give it a glazed look, kind of like you see with the Caro syrup pecan pie. And people will go nuts for this, I promise. Now, next I want to make, if you can find room for that on the top shelf of the freezer, but maybe you can tear the shiny parchment paper off at this point. See if you can pop that in the freezer while I get ready for the next recipe. Thank you. I have a double size pan. I often make it a huge rectangular pan and then cut it into squares. Now I'm going to be making the cranberry relish. This is literally the easiest relish you'll ever make because there's only 3 ingredients. And I haven't tasted a better relish, honestly, especially for the amount of time it takes to make. Oh, let me check my mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes are perfect for frosting. We'll get to that in just a second. So I'm not cleaning my food processor because I don't have time right now, but basically I have dates and nuts, so I am okay with it. We are starting with our beautiful fresh cranberries. If you're looking for a Winco, they're like 10 cents a bag. It's crazy how they sell them for 10 cents. So we're going to kind of mush them up. It's not the correct term, mush them up. We're going to process them with the S blade. That's the blade I always use. And then we're going to add, hopefully these won't have a lot of pits, our pitted dates. Now, how many you add depends on how sweet you like it. And there's a ratio that I recommend dates to cranberries. And for people that like it sweeter, then more dates. People that like it less sweet, more cranberries. Just going to check for pits. You know, if you take a canned cranberry sauce, you're going to notice that it has often high fructose corn syrup in addition to sugar, and it's just kind of nasty. And why would you want to just spend hours cooking something on the stove when you can make a raw relish for your raw friends, or even if they're not raw? It's just so much more delicious, in my opinion. And you can add different fruits to this. Like at times I've added dried pears instead of the dates. I had somebody once with a date allergy. I've added some frozen defrosted cherries to this. I've added persimmon, but I just do the 3-ingredient one most of the time: date, orange, and cranberry. Now, you could also add date paste if you didn't have the dates. And what's nice about date paste is that you've already blended it, so there shouldn't be any pits. And now I have my navel oranges and the zest. You really want that zest. It just adds another dimension of flavor. And with the zest, you might want to get a little tool called a zester. I prefer it to a microplane. Microplanes make the little shavings. They're okay, but I love these little shreds that you find. And then we process it together. You could, if you wanted, added some chia seeds to thicken it a little bit, but the truth is, this is going to thicken up in the refrigerator, and you can already see how thick and beautiful it is now. And this is going to be an accompaniment to the frosted cake, meaning the loaf. People went nuts at Thanksgiving. Everybody took this home for the little bit that was left. That's our beautiful relish. And now I want to show you how to frost the cake or the loaf. So here's our loaf. Good. I need more spatulas. Okay. Rinse this one off. Okay, so we take our mashed potatoes and look at that, we frost this. But when we double bake it, it's gonna be amazing. And then we put gravy on it and cranberry relish. Now, when I've had very few people over, meaning few, meaning like 6 total, I've actually used something called the stackable gourmet, and I made these into individual plated snacks. They were amazing. But with the amount of people now that I'm serving, I don't have time for doing those kind of dishes, or my famous stuffed squash recipe that was my traditional go-to. So you place this over the top. Oh, so good. Just potatoes, that's it. And then I'm going to refrigerate this until it's time to actually serve it. Take it out, let it come back to room temperature, and then put it in about a 375-degree oven, maybe 400, depending on how rushed I am, and just to heat it up. But then what it's going to do is it's going to twice bake the potatoes. So another thing you can do, if you like, you could probably do this with a spoon if you didn't have an offset spatula, is I like to make like a design, kind of try to get it to go evenly. I mean, I would say that in my world, this serves probably 8. We eat large portions of lower calorie dense food, but you know, also if you cut it too small, it's kind of hard to get out of the pan. Now, if I could take another one, I could put it on top and frost the sides, put the cranberry sauce on top. That's an actual, you know, design feature that you could do, and it makes it look like a cake, especially if it's round. And I've done that with many different loaf recipes, but I want to get this done because done is more profitable than perfect. And then I'm just going to go boom, make it pretty. So when it bakes, we're going to have all those little nooks and crannies. Some will be crunchy-ish, some will be creamy. No lumps in these mashed potatoes. I never liked lumps.
And I only have one more recipe to show you. We need to go over to the oven, and I'm going to make the easiest gravy in the world. So I have in my pot all the ingredients to go into this gravy right here. This is not my recipe. This is Nora Cook's, and she's allowed me to make a video of it. I'll link to her recipe below. The only change I made is I don't use soy sauce because I don't like all the sodium, and also I'm allergic to soy. And so I substituted a tiny bit of miso for it, which you probably could leave out. So I have all my dry ingredients in there, including the fabulous salt-free Dijon mustard by Primo. And then we need the broth. So depending on how much I'm making depends which broth I use. I know how to make broth. It's a pain in the butt. I just don't do it. I don't have the space in my kitchen. I don't have the time, especially when just the local store for under $3 sells an unsalted broth. But I only need 2 cups, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do with the rest? So I love the Plant Strong products too. These are a little bit pricier, but they're excellent. And all I'm going to do is pour it in the pan and turn it on high and wait for it to boil. I'm just going to stir it with my whisk. I mean, I have gravy recipes in my book that I think are delicious. I have mushroom gravy recipes where you have to saute the onion and the mushroom. And if you have time, they're worth it. But again, time is a very valuable asset to me in my life right now with writing a book and doing what I need to do. So I would rather just make a gravy in under 5 minutes, especially since I don't feel like I get anything extra by, peeling the garlic myself or chopping the onion myself or, taking all the long steps required. This tastes as good, or if not better, than any gravy recipe I've ever tried. And it takes just seconds. So we just are waiting for it to thicken up. And the thing is if it didn't thicken, and I'm hoping it will, but you know what they say, a watch pot never boils. A little trick that I learned is you take a little bit of arrowroot powder, just a little bit, maybe a tablespoon, dissolve it in tiny bit of cold water, and then stir it back in. You don't want to ever add the arrowroot or the cornstarch right to the pot. And this also gets thicker when it refrigerates. So this will thicken up. Like I say, a watch pot never boils. And that's basically, I don't know how long we've been going, a half hour, maybe 10 recipes. And this is what we're going to be serving in our holiday meal. And I hope you'll try any or all of these recipes. Let me know if you like them. My name is Chef AJ. I am on YouTube every single day. I've gone live every day for over 1,800 episodes, or almost 1,800 episodes. 1,800 is coming up next week with Dr. Michael Greger since March 20th, 2020. And you're welcome to join me in the live chat. Only available on YouTube, absolutely free. We do stream to Facebook and Twitter, but we can't really talk to you on those platforms because we don't see the chat. Yeah, I don't know if you can get a little bit closer, but it is starting to thicken. And it will just continue to get thicker in the next few minutes. So I'm just going to turn it off so that I can say goodbye and wish you and yours a very happy, healthy, prosperous holiday season and new year. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.